Hi everyone, my name is Jenny and welcome back to another video. Today I will be talking through my plans for completing the Reading Women 2021 Reading Challenge. If you are unfamiliar with the Reading Women Challenge, it's a challenge put out by the Reading Women podcast, which is a podcast about promoting books written by women that was started in 2018 and has continued since then. This will be my third year working on the challenge. I didn't complete it in 2019, but I'm going to try my best to complete it in 2020 and definitely want to make it a goal to complete it in 2021. In the previous 2 years that I have worked on the challenge, it's been a lot of prompts that I felt kind of naturally happened within my reading. However, that is not necessarily the case in the 2021 challenge. There's a lot of prompts that I really had to think about how I wanted to incorporate them. So I thought I would make this plan video and also have some kind of other ways to motivate myself to get through the prompts that I may not necessarily otherwise naturally pick up. So that's the whole point of this video. It's gonna be relatively casual. I'm not going to talk in depth about a ton of these books given that I haven't read any of them or even know a lot about a lot of them, but I thought it would be fun just to kind of share my preliminary plans. Many of the prompts, I have several books that I'm potentially considering, as well as go over how I'm planning to incorporate the challenges in each month of my reading in 2021. So let's start there. So as I said, naturally in 2019 and 2020, I read the prompts kind of as they came throughout the year. I wasn't really tracking when I was reading certain prompts or whether I was like on track to read 2 prompts each month, given that there's 24 prompts. However, this year I've decided that giving myself 2 prompts to work on specifically that month will be the best way to actually complete these prompts, as many of these prompts require books that I don't own or books that I will have to get from the library. And so kind of having those 2 prompts that I'm working on in that month I think will be helpful in making sure that I actually complete those prompts. So I've written them all on little pieces of paper and put them in this beautiful ceramic bowl. I'm a big fan of ceramics and this is one of my many little blue bowls that I have. So my plan each month is to pick out 2 prompts that I will plan to read the next month. So you will get a special treat during this video, as well I've been very excited about this, in that I will pick the first 2 prompts, it is December 18th right now, to read for January, just in the event that I have to acquire a book or 2 books for the prompt to complete them, and that, given COVID-19 and shipping, as well as library holds, might take a couple of weeks. So I want to give myself some time to make sure that I have those books so I can read them in time for the month that they are scheduled to happen. So I'll be picking 2 of the prompts, and in my January 2021 TBR, I will talk about the 2 books that I'm planning on reading to fulfill those prompts. Now going through the 24 prompts, as I said, some of them I've picked a specific book that I definitely will be reading for this prompt, but others I have several different books depending on my mood during the given point of the year, given that I could read these prompts at any point during the year, or books that may become available only at some point in 2021. So I will just kind of go through the prompts and book plans that I have. Again, if any of these books sound interesting to you or books that you've read, I would love to have like a buddy read, or if there's a particular book you recommend, do let me know down in the comment section below, as I definitely, I think, will be intrigued to hear other people's perspectives on some of these books that I've picked. So starting with the first challenge, we have a book that was longlisted for the JCB prize. This is a literary fiction prize that is from India. So I read a fair amount of Indian literature, but not a ton. So I did have to, 1, look up what this prize was, and 2, see what was on the long list for the past 3 years of the prize, as I think it's a relatively recent prize. And there was one book that I've already read and that I own a physical copy of that I could reread for this challenge, which is The Far Field by Mentari Vijay. I read this at some point in early 2019 and really enjoyed it, and it actually won the prize in 2019. So this is an option for me, although I'm not entirely sure I want to reread it. Then the other 2 options that I have are a book from the 2020 shortlist of the prize, which is Gin Patrol and the Purple Line by Deepa Anapara. I've heard pretty good things about this one, and I think it might be on BookTube Prizes 2021 long list, so I'll be definitely keeping an eye on that one. And then the second one is one that I've not heard talked about a ton on BookTube, but I'm intrigued about it. It came out this year from One World, but it was originally published in 2018 in India, and that's Latitudes of Longing, and this is by Shubhangi Swarup. And also, just a disclaimer, the prize's focus this year is international authors, so I may say some authors' names incorrectly. This one was published, as I said, originally in 2018, so it was longlisted in 2018 for the JCB prize, and I believe is a set of interconnected short stories, so I'm excited about that one as well. Prompt number 2 is one that I do have a specific book planned for this one. Editing Jenny here, I forgot to say what prompt number 2 was, which is an author from Eastern Europe, which is Drive Your Plows Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. This one won the Nobel Prize, as well as was the winner of the Man Booker International Prize. It was originally published in the Polish in 2009, but was translated into the English in 2018. So this one is one that I've heard a lot of good things about. My mom has actually read this one, and this is actually technically her copy, and so I am intrigued to read it and thought, since I already have a copy of this one, it'd be ideal to fulfill this challenge. Then moving on to prompt number 3, which is a book about incarceration. This could be a fiction book or a non-fiction book. I've decided to go with Sing Unburied Sing by Jesmyn Ward, which, as you can see, is another book that I had on my shelves. This one follows a young boy who is going with his mother to pick up his father from prison. He's being released from prison, and so obviously there's a lot of discussion about incarceration and kind of its impact, I believe, on families that are indirectly tied to the incarceration system here in America. So super excited about this one. This will be my first introduction to Jesmyn Ward, who I believe was one of the bonus prompt authors a couple years back, if I'm not mistaken. So that will be my plans for a book about incarceration. Then moving on to prompt number 4, we have a cookbook by a woman of color. I believe I've talked about this a little bit on my channel, but I love cooking and I love cookbooks, so I was super excited about this prompt, and I knew just the book that I wanted to pick for this prompt, which is In Bibi's Kitchen, The Recipes and Stories of Grandmothers from 8 African Countries That Touch the Indian Ocean. This is by Hawa Hassan and Julia Tershin, and I don't know if I mentioned this on my channel before, but I actually studied abroad in Tanzania in my junior year of college, and so I have deep connections to East Africa and Tanzania. More specifically, I do love Tanzanian food, which is not something that's kind of known on the global cuisine world, but I find it to be really delicious, and it really reminds me of my host family and the foods that they cooked for me. So I'm really excited to have a cookbook that has recipes from Tanzania and nearby East African countries, and this one actually came out towards the end of 2020, and as soon as I heard about it, I was like, I need to have this. So I put it at the top of my Christmas and birthday wish list. My birthday is at the beginning of February, so this is one that if I don't get it for Christmas and then I don't get it for my birthday, I will be buying it as a birthday present to myself. But I'm super excited about this one. It looks absolutely beautiful and definitely something that I have been looking for from cookbook publishing for quite a while, and I've yet to find an East African cookbook that's published here in the United States that kind of has the kind of food photography and marketing put into it that I've really thought was worth it. So super excited about this one quite a lot, and definitely will be showing it as soon as I have a copy. Then prompt number 5 is to read a book with a protagonist that's older than 50 years old, and bonus points if the author is also over 50. So I have 2 options for this, both of which were from my physical TBR. First of which is Gilead by Marilyn Robinson. This one, the protagonist is a man, so I'm slightly hesitant to use it for this challenge, as I do try to kind of read books about women and by women as much as possible for the Reading Women Challenge, but this is one I'm definitely going to be reading in 2021 anyway, so I might include it. And also, Marilyn Robinson is definitely a woman. She's a well-known female author, and she is definitely over the age of 50, so that is an option. The other of which is The Wife by Meg Wolitzer. Now I know from the movie tie-in edition, which I'll put a picture of right here, that the main characters in this are both over the age of 50. At least they definitely look like they're over the age of 50 in that movie tie-in poster, but I am not entirely sure how old they are, and I'm also not entirely sure if Meg Wolitzer was over 50 when this book was published. I know she's over 50 now. I believe she's about 60, but I don't think she was over 50 when this one was published. So not the bonus points, but definitely would count towards this challenge. And both of these are very short too, which I try to look for when I'm finding books for this type of reading challenge. Then prompt number 6 is actually a tie-in to something that I'm not going to be able to do for the 2020 reading challenge, which is a South American author in translation. So for this one, I'm going to be reading Something by Isabel Allende. I've not fully decided what, although Island Beneath the Sea is calling to me a bit. I've also heard good things about The House of Spirits, so if you have any suggestions of where to start with Isabel Allende, do let me know down in the comment section below. But she was one of the bonus author prompts for this year's challenge, and I just wasn't able to get to her during this year. So I'd love to kind of remedy that by including her in the 2021 challenge. I've only ever read one short story by her, and I remember it very vividly just by reading it probably about 10 or 11 years ago. And it was a story that was, I think, from her Eva Luna collection, about this young girl who was trapped in a volcanic eruption, and some person, like aid worker, is with her as she's like slowly dying because her like body is trapped underneath the ash. And it was very heartbreaking and very like intense to read about, and obviously I still have very vivid memories of it, so I'm very intrigued to read kind of more of her work. Then prompt number 7 is to reread an old favorite. So I have a couple options for this, the first of which is one that I was thinking about reading this year in preparation for the new TV show coming out that I first read back in 2019, and it's definitely one of my all-time favorites, which is Normal People by Sally Rooney. This one's pretty short. I have already read it before, obviously, so I think it would go by pretty quickly, and it's definitely one that I've kind of considered in the past to read, so definitely an option. The other of which is actually 2 books and may relate to a later challenge, which are The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang and The Bride Test, which both of these are romance novels that I've really enjoyed. This one, The Kiss Quotient, which is the first one in this series, is actually one of the books that I would say got me into the romance genre and is still definitely one of my favorites of the genre. I just absolutely loved it. It is very steamy, but it's also, I just found the kind of relationship dynamics to be really fun. Granted, this, as I said, was one of the first romances I read, so I'd be intrigued to see if my perceptions of this one have changed slightly, but I also want to reread these 2 because the third one, The Heart Principle, is coming out in August, and it's about Kwan, who everyone in like the Romancelandia part of BookTube keeps saying like, oh, I'm so excited for Kwan's book, and generally I don't remember who Kwan is. So I think I'm gonna reread them just so I can have a better sense of like who Kwan is as a character, so I can be prepared for The Heart Principle come August. So that is a plan, and I do think also that reading some romance novels, especially ones that I've already read, would be fun but not too challenging. So prompt number 8 is a memoir by an Indigenous woman. This is one of the prompts that I had to investigate a bit more thoroughly, particularly because I don't really enjoy a memoir as a genre very much, so I wanted to find either authors that I've read from previously or books that sounded particularly relevant to my interests. So I found 3 that I am intrigued about, the first of which is Abandoned Me Memoirs by Melissa Febos. Febos is half Native American, I believe, and I could not find any information about what specific nation within the United States her father is from, but I know that this series of personal essays / memoirs explores her relationship with her biological father, who left her, in addition to her adopted father, who is really her primary caretaker. So I am very intrigued about this one, and I recently read Short Story from Febos in Kink, which is an anthology that's coming out early next year that I really enjoyed, so I was intrigued to read more of her work. And so I actually coincidentally just like heard about this, and then shortly after, maybe even 2 days after I read that short story and was intrigued about her as an author, I saw the Reading Women Challenge and that this book would actually work. This is most likely the book that I will use for this prompt, but I do have 2 others, the first of which is The Mason House by Marie Bertinow. Bertinow is a member of the Anishinaabe tribe here in the United States, and this one is a memoir about her childhood home, or her ancestral home, in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And then we also have Crazy Brave by Jo Harjo, which I saw Jacqueline from 6 Minutes for Me, who is one of the co-hosts of the podcast, talk about really enjoying. And I've read Jo Harjo's poetry previously. She was the poet laureate, or she still is, I'm not entirely sure, and she is a member of the Muskogee Nation out in Oklahoma. So intrigued about this one as well. Prompt number 9 is a book by a neurodivergent author, and actually Helen Huang would work for this. Huang is on the autism spectrum, so her 3rd book, which I definitely will be reading at some point in 2021, The Heart Principle, will definitely count for this if I pull this prompt before The Heart Principle comes out. I think I will read Take a Hint, Dani Brown, which is another romance novel by Talia Hibbert, who is also on the autism spectrum, and I've heard nothing but amazing things about this one, so super excited about this. Also, sorry, the sun is coming in. I thought it would be okay, but it seems like the light is like coming towards me, so sorry about that. Then prompt number 10 is a crime novel or thriller in translation. This was probably the hardest prompt for me, or one of the hardest, because I don't really read crime novels or thrillers, and I don't read that much translated fiction. However, I do want to read more translated fiction, so I'm excited that that is such an important component of this year's challenge. But this one I'm purely basing off of the recommendations of the Goodreads reading group, and I think I'll read The Tenant by Katrin Enberg. This is translated from the Danish, and I believe came out either in 2020 or in 2019, and I really know nothing about this one except it's a police procedural about a female detective in Copenhagen, which is a place that I would love to visit. So I thought that was enough of a reason to check this one out. I definitely will be reading this one from the library, probably as an audiobook, just because, as I said, I'm not the biggest like crime novel thriller person. Then prompt number 11 is a book about the natural world, and this is another one that I definitely think I'll be able to complete naturally through my reading this year. So I do just have a few random picks, but honestly I think I could really read just about anything. So the first is a recent acquisition, which is Rising Dispatches from the New American Shore by Elizabeth Rush. This, as it says on the subtitle, is a nonfiction book about climate change and rising sea level and the problems that that will cause for people in the United States. So excited about that one. We also have All We Can Save: Truth, Courage, and Solutions for the Climate Crisis, which was edited by Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson and Catherine K. Wilkinson. And this one actually, ooh, sorry, it's getting dark on my face. And this one is all women talking about solutions to the climate crisis. And there's a bunch of women on here. They're all featured on the back. So this is another one that I was planning on getting to in 2021 anyway, so this would also work for this prompt. And then finally, I have Urban Forests: A Natural History of Trees and People in the American Cityscape by Jill Jones. Again, another one that I've been looking forward to for quite a while and have had on my shelves for quite a while. I think I actually bought this for my dad or my mom as a Christmas present like several years ago, and both of them have read it and really enjoyed it. Actually, this one was also a birthday present for my dad, so I just buy my dad a bunch of books about climate change in the natural world and then I read them instead. So this is another one that could work for this natural world prompt. Then prompt number 12, halfway through our prompts, we have a young adult novel by a Latinx author. I don't really read a lot of young adult as well. However, I am all for kind of picking up books by diverse authors. So I've picked a few at random that the multitude of people here on BookTube that talk about and read frequently YA seem to have enjoyed. So hopefully I will enjoy one of these and can get it as an ebook or an audiobook from the library. So we have This Is How We Fly by Anna Mariano, A Cuban Girl's Guide to Tea and Tomorrow by Laura Taylor Namey, Furia by Yamil Said Mendez, Sia Martinez and the Moonlit Beginning of Everything by Rockwell Vasquez Gilliland. I'm pretty sure I totally butchered that name. I'm very sorry. Lobizona by Romina Garber. Heard a lot about this one. And Don't Date Rosa Santos by Nina Moreno. So any of those would work for this prompt. I don't really have a preference between any of them because, as I said, I don't really read that much YA, and so I really am open to whatever. Then prompt number 13 is a poetry collection by a Black woman, and I actually used my New Daughters of Africa anthology edited by Margaret Busby to help me find some options for this. So I've been reading this slowly and steadily for the past 5 months and very recently finished it, and throughout my reading process I've been tabbing the ones that I was interested in checking out in the future. So I went through my tabs to find any poets. I traditionally don't read a lot of poetry, but there were some poets in here that I did enjoy, and so from that kind of search through this collection, I found a fair number of poetry collections that I'm intrigued about and that I will use one of for this prompt. I also did that for the short story by a Caribbean author prompt, which is going to come up at the end of this video. So the poetry collections by poets that came from New Daughters of Africa that I'm intrigued about include Transformatrix by Patience Agbabi, Dear Remote Nearness of You by Daniel Ligros Georges, Seasonal Disturbances by Karen McCarthy Wolf, Monument by Natasha Trethewey, who I believe was also a US Poet Laureate, Seeing the Body and Lighting the Shadow, both by Rachel Eliza Griffiths, Bestiary by Donica Kelly, and My Mother Was a Freedom Fighter by Aja Monet. So if you have read any of those poetry collections, do let me know your thoughts about any of them, because as I said, I've read short samples of all of their poetry and I did enjoy it enough to tab that section however many months ago I did read it, but I don't know a ton about any of these collections or even what to really look for when experiencing or reading a poetry collection, as my understandings and knowledge of poetry are pretty much limited to like reading some Mary Oliver. So yeah, if you have any suggestions of other people or of any of these collections that you have enjoyed, do let me know down in the comment section below. Then moving on to prompt 14, we have a book that features a biracial protagonist. So this one I just looked through my TBR, both on my Kindle as well as my physical TBR, to find books that included biracial main characters. So I have 2 on my Kindle, the first of which is Indigo, which is by Beverly Jenkins and is a romance novel where the male lead is biracial. And then we also have Her Night with the Duke, which is by Diana Quincy, and in this one the female lead is biracial. So I could read either of those for this prompt. I I also have another romance novel, which is You Had Me at Gola by Alexis Daria. I believe our female lead in this book, if I'm not mistaken, is half Filipino and half Puerto Rican. So that is that one option. I also have My Education by Susan Choi, which I believe our main character, whose name is Regina, is half Korean and half white, I think. So the lighting in here is changing dramatically, so sorry about that. But the next book that is also a biracial protagonist is A Good Neighborhood by Therese Ann Fowler. This one I've actually been somewhat hesitant to pick up because I've seen some pretty mixed things about it, but I do know one of the main teenagers in this book is a biracial half black man. So I'm intrigued about this one. May or may not actually read this. If you have read it and didn't like it, do let me know down in the comment section below, as I have thought about just unhauling this one without reading it because I've seen some mixed things. Then prompt number 15 is a Muslim middle grade novel. Again, I didn't have any books on my physical TBR for this, so I kind of just used my like booktube knowledge as well as just books that I'd kind of heard about through other sources. But I do have a few that I'm intrigued about. The first of which is Amal Unbound by Aisha Saeed. I actually have read Aisha Saeed before and really enjoyed her, and I know she's local to Atlanta, and I've heard really good things about this one on booktube, so I'm intrigued about this. I also have Other Words from Home by Jasmine Warga, The Girl and the Ghost by Hannah Alkoff, and Unsettled by Reem Faruqi, which is actually coming out in 2021, but I believe I saw Ashley at Bookstrom talk about it and it sounded pretty good. I am excited about any of those ones, and if you know anything about those ones as well, do let me know down in the comment section below. Then prompt number 16 is a queer love story. For this one, I have two options, the first of which doesn't come out till June of 2021, so if I get this prompt in the second half, I will likely read One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. This is a romance novel that has a female-female romance at the center of it. And then another option, if this prompt comes up in the first half of 2021, is an early arc that I have through NetGalley that comes out in March, which is called The Unbroken by C.L. Clark. And this one, I do know it's a fantasy trilogy, and this is the start to this fantasy trilogy, that is going to feature a female-female romance. However, I'm not entirely sure if this first book they're actually going to like have a love story, if that makes sense. So I'm not entirely sure if it will count towards this prompt. If it does, and I definitely will be reading it before March, I will be counting it, but if not, then I'll wait till One Last Stop. Then prompt number 17 is a book about a woman in politics. So I have a maybe option for this, and then what I would likely end up picking. So my maybe option is A Moonless Starless Sky, Ordinary Women and Men Fighting Extremism in Africa by Alexis Okiowo. So this one is, as it said on the subtitle, a nonfiction book about men and women, I assume, engaging in political activism in their countries that have extremist governments. However, I'm not entirely sure, so I don't know if the people kind of featured in this narrative technically count as being involved in politics. So I will kind of have to read this one and see, because it may just be that these are like people living their lives under a very extremist and authoritarian political regime. So I'm not entirely sure about this one. If you have read it and you could give me more information about that, that would be super helpful. But this is one that I do hope to read in 2021. The other option for a woman in politics would be any of the books written by Stacey Abrams, who I absolutely love. She's definitely one of my favorite political icons here in the United States political realm today. And she published a book in the summer of this year, 2020, called Our Time Is Now, that I've been meaning to read for quite a while. So this one is probably one that I would pick up and read, as I know it's about Stacey Abrams in some capacity, and she's definitely a woman in politics. Granted, she is in politics here in the country that I live, but I love her, so I'm probably gonna read her book. Then prompt number 18 is a book with a rural setting. So I have three options for this one. The first of which is What You Were Getting Wrong About Appalachia by Elizabeth Kate. This is a nonfiction book about Appalachia, and I believe it's mainly a critique of hillbilly elegy. So I'm intrigued about this one, and it's super short, so definitely one that I'm hoping to get to in 2021 anyway. But then I also have two fiction books, the first of which is The Flicker of Old Dreams, a novel by Susan Henderson. This one takes place in rural Western, it doesn't say, it says in the Great Plains, so I'm gonna assume probably like North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana section of the United States, which is an area that is definitely very rural. It's probably the most rural place in the United States, I would say. Although Mississippi and Alabama are also pretty rural, and Alaska America has a lot of rural places. But anyway, so this one I don't really know that much about, but I have had on my shelves and I've been intrigued to read, and I know it takes place in a rural place, so I thought this one might work for this challenge. And then finally we have Half Wild Stories by Robin MacArthur. These ones, I'm not entirely sure that they take place in a rural setting, but I do know they take place in Vermont. And Vermont is also a pretty rural place here in the US, so I'm assuming that these people live pretty rural lives. So that is another one that I am considering for this challenge. Then we have a prompt that I found particularly intriguing, but I don't think will be particularly challenging for me to complete, which is a cover designed by a woman. So this is something I literally never thought about before. I mean, I thought about it somewhat given that my aunt actually works in publishing in art design, but I did kind of investigate just some of the books on my shelves, really just with covers that I liked, assuming they'd likely be done by women, and I was correct. So I have quite a few that I have just picked that I will likely be reading, honestly, within like January or February, because these are ones that are really top priorities for 2021. So I'll just quickly go through them now, and I'm sure one of them will be the one that I will count towards this challenge. The first of which is actually an early arc that I definitely will be reading in January because it comes out in February, and that's Milk, Blood, Heat by Danielle Moniz. This is a short story collection that's coming out from Grove Atlantic that was designed by Kelly Winton. So I definitely will be reading that one in January. Also designed by Kelly Winton was Writers and Lovers by Lily King, which is also out from Grove Atlantic. So I assume Kelly Winton must work closely with Grove Atlantic, but I do also really enjoy this cover. And this is one I was hoping to get to by the end of 2020, but I don't think it's going to happen. So 2021, it probably is. We also have Transcendent Kingdom by Ya Jossi. This one was designed by Kelly Blair and is one that I was potentially going to be reading with Lindsay in January. So Lindsay, if you are watching this and you still want to buddy read this in January, do let me know. And then the last one is Conjure Woman by Afia Otakora, which is another one that I really meant to read during 2020, and I just don't think it's going to happen. But this one was designed by Dana Lee Blanchett and is one of my favorite covers, I think, that I have on my shelves. So excited that this one was also designed by a woman. Then prompt number 20 is one that I actually had quite a lot of trouble finding books for, and I found an article that was actually super helpful that I will put a link to down in the description box below. That was published by Al Fanar Media in August of 2020 during Women in Translation Month about the struggles of women in the Arab world. Oh, this one is Arab author in translation. I don't remember if I said that. But about women in the Arab world and their difficulties being translated into English. So there is not only a dearth of books written originally in Arabic translated into English in general in the Western publishing industry, but particularly there's an extra small percentage of women that are published from Arabic into English. So this is something that there's really not that many books that fulfill this prompt at this time, which is obviously a problem. Like, the Arab world is hugely important to our global understandings of like how the world works. Muslim people are like a third of the people in the world, so obviously this is a very important prompt, but it was one that was challenging to find books for, which I think is in part why it was added on this list. But that article that I read, which as I said will be linked in the description box below, had a few books in talking about the recent trends of kind of more Arab women being translated into English that I used and found intriguing enough to add to this list. The article also talked a bit about the kind of Western gaze on the Arab world, which I thought was super engaging. So all in all, I would really recommend reading this article if you're considering completing this prompt, because I think it will help you contextualize what you may be reading more generally about Arab work in translation than you may previously have thought about it. So I have several books for this prompt, the first of which is actually one that was not from that article, but is Sex and Lies by Leila Slimani. I've read Slimani's debut novel, which in English was published as The Perfect Nanny. I think it was published as Lullaby in French, which was the original language it was written in. So it's not translated from an Arab language, but that was not the requirement of the prompt. But Sex and Lies is a recent book by Slimani, who is of Moroccan descent, talking about Moroccan women and their sex practices, particularly given that Morocco is a very conservative country and a lot of kind of both women's bodies but also discussions of sex and intimacy are kept pretty secret. So this one sounded really intriguing, and it is a nonfiction book that's in translation, which feels somewhat rare. So this is one that I may pick up even if I pick up other books on this list, and that's actually true for most of the books that I've mentioned in this video are books that I'm interested in picking up even if I don't necessarily count them towards this challenge. Then the next one is actually the Man Booker International winner for 2020, which was Celestial Bodies by Joka Al-Tarthi. Al-Tarthi is an Omani woman currently living in the UK. However, this book was written in Arabic and translated into English, and I believe is telling the story of many generations of women living in a small village. So this one also sounds quite good. We also have Minor Detail by Andania Sibley, who is a Palestinian author. Passage to the Plaza by Salhar Khalife, who's also a Palestinian author, and this one is one that actually was published back in the 90s in Arabic, but is only just in 2020 being translated into English. And then finally we have one that's actually coming out in March of 2021, which is Voices of the Lost by Hoda Bakaret, and Bakaret is a Lebanese author. Then we have two prompts that I have a set book for, the first of which is prompt number 21, which is a book by a trans author, and for this I'll be reading All the Birds in the Sky by Charlie Jane Anders. This is one that I've had on my Kindle for several years now. I think I got it as a freebie from Tor like back in 2018 and have never read it, so I'm hoping to remedy that. Then we also have prompt number 22, which is a fantasy novel by an Asian author, and again, same story, I'll be reading The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, which is an ebook that I've had on my Kindle for several years, also probably since 2018, that I really have been meaning to read, particularly now that the third and final book in this trilogy is out. I think I will just have to emotionally prepare myself to read this trilogy now, since I can now read all three books at once. Then for the second to last prompt, which is a nonfiction book focused on social justice, I have three options, the first of which is A Windless Starless Sky, because this one definitely I think would include some social justice elements to it. We also have Cast, The Origins of Our Discontent by Isabel Wilkerson, definitely one that I want to get to in 2021, so I feel like it would be good for this prompt. And then finally we have another NetGalley early arc that comes out in February called The Sum of Us by Heather McGee, and this one is about racism and economic policy in America. Then finally the last prompt is a short story collection by a Caribbean author. So as I said, with the poetry collection, I used my New Daughters of Africa anthology to find a bunch of authors who are from the Caribbean and who have published short story collections. So my options include Everything Inside by Edward Danticant, who is from Haiti, Where There Are Monsters by Brianne McIver, who's from Trinidad, The Paintry by Olive Sr., who's from Jamaica, and Summer Lightning and Other Stories, also by Olive Sr., How to Escape a Leper Colony by Tiffany Yannick, who's from the US Virgin Island of St. Thomas, and Stories from Blue Latitudes, which is actually an anthology that was edited by Elizabeth Nunez. Then finally, there are 4 bonus prompts this year, and I would love to get to all 4 of them. So I've made plans to read 1 book by each author each quarter of 2021. So I'm going to start with Alexis Wright and the Swan book for January to March. Then I will read Tsitsi Dangaramba's Nervous Conditions at some point between April and June. I will then read Elsewhere Home by Leila Abuela during the months of July to September, and then from October to December I will either read The Housekeeper and the Professor or potentially Revenge by Yoko Ogawa. So those are all of my Reading Women 2021 challenge prompt plans. If you have Reading Women plans for next year, do let me know down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear any of the books that you're planning on reading, or if they're similar or different to any of the books that I am. Additionally, if any of these books are ones that you are also thinking of reading, I'd love to do a buddy read or just talk about these books with someone in the near future. So also do let me know down in the comment section below about that. And now let's do what we've all been waiting for, which is picking my 2 prompts for January and seeing what I will be reading first. So we have all of our things. Oh, some of them are falling out. Okay, so let's pick this one, which is a fantasy novel by an Asian author. So I'll be reading The Poppy War in January, and then the other one will be longlisted for the JCB prize. So I will decide between now and when I film my January 2021 TBR if I want to read Gin Patrol on the Purple Line or Latitudes of Longing. So thank you so much for watching if you've gotten this far into the video. If you are new to my channel through this video, I'd love to have you stick around and subscribe, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.